Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, the one stop destination for the civil services English medium aspirants. Welcome to the daily Hindu analysis. If I'm clearly audible and visible, please let me know in the live chat box and allow me to resume this session. Please write yes. Wonderful. All looks good. Let's start. An important announcement. With prelims approaching this year, like every other year, but much bigger and better, we have launched the Conquer Prelims 2026 program. This initiative is absolutely free of cost. Most of it will be conducted on YouTube. A few aspects will also be done in special classes that will be on the platform, but absolutely free of cost. This is a detailed program in multiple phases to ensure that you probably don't need anything more to clear pre and handle UPSC prelims questions for 2026. In case you are interested, please make sure that you check the link in the description box as well as in the pinned comment section to click on this video where Sarmat sir has in a lot amount of detail explained the phases of Conquer Pre. Another important announcement. Now the time for mock tests will begin, especially after 15th of January, which is why this is providing you a very good opportunity for competing with lakhs of students that will be taking up Unacademy's UPSC Civil Services Prelims mock test on the 17th of January. The timings are 9:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. Definitely make use of this to evaluate your performance and also to encounter some very important questions that could directly be important. These are the topics that we will be discussing today. Since it's a Sunday, very few topics that are very relevant. Let's dive into the first topic. Why was bail denied to Umar and Sharjeel? This was recently. What is the context? So this is important from GS paper 2 polity. That means how are some acts made? What are the design and the problems with those acts? This can also be important for GS paper 3 internal security. What is the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act? What are the problems? What are the criticisms? What is the rationale for having it? Why is the need to continue with such an act in the 21st century as well? So those can be questions, and therefore the context was a recent ruling in January, that is January 5th. The Supreme Court denied bail to few activists, the one of the prominent ones being Umar Khalid, who was accused of creating problems associated with the Delhi riots of 2020. The disturbance caused, the traffic jams, disruption of peace, economic activities, etc. These were the accusations on which he was booked and charged under the UAPA. He has been in the trials, or he has been in custody for very long. He's an inmate, he's an under trial, he's already in the jail for about 5 years. Yet the trial has not even begun. And the bail, even after so many years, has been denied on Jan 5th by the Supreme Court. So let's understand in this case, what is the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act? Please note, for UPSC, a lot of controversial topics are not important, but the underlying idea and the subject around it is very important. So UAPA should be discussed in some amount of length. Let's discuss this. Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This is what we are discussing. Now this act was made in the 1960s. Why? The objective of this act, let's understand this. The objective of this act was to ensure that any threatening activity towards the sovereignty, integrity, or territorial integrity of India can be snubbed, can be handled, can be prosecuted. Basically, in this time, there was a pressure of various secessionist movements that are championing the idea of breaking a certain part of India, gaining independence from India, or altering the status quo in India. Secession means a part of the territory of the Indian Union. There were movements where groups were asking for separating of this territory. There were movements where groups were asking for independence of certain territories in India. These were secessionist tendencies. And therefore, the idea was to curb these secessionist tendencies and even acts of terrorism that disrupt the peace as well as sovereignty in India. With this objective, a stringent law was created, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Why stringent? As the saying goes, for tough times, you have to take tough measures. So, in order to curb these kind of issues, one of the stringent act was made, that is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. What are the powers under this act given to the union government in order to declare? So, union government under this act has the ability to declare an association as unlawful. Why unlawful? If they are taking up unlawful activities. What kind of activities can be considered unlawful? If this association operating in India, either by word spoken or written or in any other manner, threatens the sovereignty, integrity, and territorial integrity of India, then this organization can be declared unlawful by the government and a ban on this organization can be put instantly. That is one of the powers. Another power is the union government can declare an organization that is operating in India as a terrorist organization. Earlier, please note, only an organization could be declared as a terrorist organization. But after the 2019 amendment, an amendment to the UAPA, after that amendment, even individuals could be declared as terrorists. Is this absolutely clear? Individuals can also be declared as terrorists for taking up any activity. If a terrorist organization is participating in a terror activity, if it is promoting a terror activity, or in any way, please understand the wordings, involved in a terror activity, it can be declared as a terrorist organization. What all can be terror activities? That also has a very expansive definition. Why? Because it is worded in such a way that most of the time any activity can be considered as terrorist activities. It can be interpreted in order to fit into that definition. Using section 15 of the UAPA Act, terror activities can be any act, again the same wording, that threatens the sovereignty, the territorial integrity, the unity of India, creating any disturbances, etc. Also threatening any kind of economic security. That means you're trying to bring about a standstill in India, disrupting essential services in order to threaten the economy of India as well. Not just using explosives, not just using terror, not just activities that have any kind of violence associated with it, but even activities that disrupt economic security, day to day life, essential services, etc. This can also be interpreted as a terrorist act. Or they try to inculcate terror or fear in the minds of the people. Any kind of activity that inculcates fear in the minds of the people can also be, under Section 15, considered as an act of terror. This act also has a schedule attached. The schedule has a list of offences, or those lists that again can be considered as a terror act. This list is also in sync with various international treaties. For example, treaties associated with hostages, etc. Those crimes and offences have also been added in a schedule that is attached with this act. Another important aspect associated with this is the various periods. For example, the judicial custody. The judicial custody of the person can continue for a very long time. Normally, it has to be only till 90 days. But under the UAPA, this is also very stringent. It is very lax. That means it will not be easy for a person to get bail. For 180 odd days, a person can be in judicial custody without the beginning of a trial and without even the filing of charges. That means without a trial or without even a charge sheet. They have not even proved, they have not even filed proper charges under any act specifically of what you have done. And yet you could be in custody for easily 180 days. In this kind of a act, since it was made, the rationale of it was made to prosecute terrorists, any act that is detrimental to the peace and security of India, it was made stringent. But there's also a price that we pay for that stringency. What is the price? Bail is not the norm. Unlike other criminal justice systems, for example, other offences under the criminal code, IPC, BNS, etc., where bail is generally the norm, here bail is not the norm. In fact, if the prima facie, if the court knows or understands that the charges against you, the accusations against you are right, bail can be denied for a very, very long time. This almost puts the pressure on you to prove the charges otherwise. You're the accused and you have the burden of proof to prove it otherwise. Or otherwise, the bail will be denied sooner or later. That becomes one of the major issues associated with it. On that note, let us understand few aspects that have been mentioned in the newspaper as well. For instance, please understand, the courts added one more new definition while giving this ruling and judgment. There were other few co-accused for the same incidents, that is the Delhi riots as well as the Delhi protests associated with the Citizenship Amendment Act. Those 5 co-accused, please remember, other than Umar and Sharjeel, those 5 co-accused have been given bail. They have been granted bail. That means they were treated differently as compared to Umar. This was a question raised in the courts, and therefore the courts explained this with a term that basically says hierarchy of roles. Let's understand this while deciding bail applications. What is hierarchy of role? Hierarchy of role basically means depending on how you were involved in the commission of the crime, you will be treated differently. That means, do you have a role that is fueling the ideological drive? Are you the mind behind what others are doing? Have you instigated the others to commit these acts? Are you the main command head through which the orders are passed on to the others? Versus the others who are just following your commands, are not driving the ideology, the movement, but are merely in the role that are of participation, that are derivative in nature. And therefore, the quote says the others, they participated in a derivative in nature, as they merely carried out directions that were given from the higher chain of command. That is why they can be considered differently as minor participants, not major accused. That is what the court says in treating these two differently. Umar Khalid differently, and those that have been recently given bail differently. Why? Because they said you cannot be kept on an equal footing. There is a hierarchy of role. Your role is bigger as compared to theirs. You are the mastermind, you are the command head, you are driving the ideology, you are instigating the people. They were simply following your orders. In fact, the courts almost calls them local level facilitators, not the main co-accused. And therefore, their bail should not be treated as a precedent for Umar to also get bail. This is what the courts have mentioned. Of course, UAPA goes against a lot of provisions of fundamental rights. For example, Article 21, the right to liberty. And therefore, the courts also said that this right to liberty is not absolute. This can often be curbed when it comes to cases such as these, when it comes to national security. That has also been mentioned. The Terrorist Act, what is Terrorist Act? We've already discussed this. Section 15. Now, in here, the Terrorist Act with him, with Umar Khalid, was considered, and the interpretation is of course open, was considered as a way that your protests that you did associated with Constitutional Amendment Act of Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 led to various disruption in services in the National Capital Region. It led to disruption of usual traffic due to chakka jams, blockades. It led to major protests. It fueled dissent in the people. And therefore, the opposition, the defense, his defense lawyer said that he has not used any kind of violence. He has not used any kind of explosives, no kind of bombs. Nothing has been used in that context. No bombs have been used, no explosive have been used, no terror has been inflicted. The court said just using bombs, explosives, etc. is not when it will be considered an act of terror. Act of terror has a very expansive definition. Even if it is disrupting the usual essential services in Delhi, the usual traffic in Delhi, bringing Delhi to a halt, that can also be treated as an act of terror. So these chakka jams, blockades, protests can also be interpreted under UAPA, a very expansive definition that the court has taken in this context. Let's go ahead. What are the punishments under this? The punishment under this can be as high, please understand, it's a very grave act, as death penalty or life imprisonment as well. The agency that has been tasked to investigate matters under UAPA, that also you must know, is the National Investigation Agency. NIA has been given the powers to do so. Having understood this, we also must understand the criticism, the issues, the concerns associated with this act. Individuals, a lot of critics, call this a draconian act. Why draconian? Because in a democracy, in a fully fledged democracy like India, that runs on the basis of constitution, laws, safeguards, fundamental rights for the people, such a stringent act, especially in times like today, might be considered a little extra. It is draconian. Why? Because the definitions under this act are so expansive, or they are worded in such a way, in an ambiguous way, that create the interpretation of these wording to mean anything. Any act can be considered an act of terror. Why? Because these definitions are vaguely worded. They lack objectivity, they lack specificity. They're expansive. Anything can be considered. They're very huge words. Anything that intends to harm the territorial integrity of India. So these vague definitions make this act open to interpretation, and this interpretation by the central government can also lead to a case, a possibility where this can be misused in order to curb any dissent, any opposition against the government as well. Data has it that between 2010 to 2023, almost 16 plus journalists, please understand, the work of the journalists is to ensure that they increase awareness against the government or showcase their report card to the people. But any kind of opinion, even if a little harsh, can be termed as a terrorist activities and unlawful activity, etc., and they can be booked under it. This can also have a very detrimental impact on the functioning of media, the freedom that media enjoys in the country. 16 plus journalists have been booked under this act in these last 10 years. Draconian act. The second is, of course, it violates by taking away the right to bail, where bail is generally the norm. The criminal justice system works on a premise that you are innocent until proven guilty. So it violates certain principles of natural justice, and it violates the idea of liberty as enshrined in Article 21 of the Constitution. It is a bit harsh when it comes to bail terms. 180 days of custody. 180 days of custody is a bit harsh without any charge. That means even if the prosecution has not filed a charge sheet, yet you will be under custody. That is also a little bit of an absurd provision. Last but not the least, the lack of safeguards. The lack of procedural safeguards in this regard. For example, even the courts are very specific in not granting bails under the UAPA Act. That becomes a problem. In other cases, criminal justice cases, the courts are very, very proactive. But with UAPA, they give a lot of way and the possibility of the law enforcement agencies to be right. Last but not the least, the NCRB statistics suggests that out of all the cases that have been filed, only 2% of the cases have led to conviction. They have been convicted in only 2% of the cases. This numbers basically suggest the merit. Maybe the prosecution does not have the merit, the ground, the allegations that actually stand ground. And people are still being tortured under the name of national security. So these are the concerns that you can mention as well. A practice question that you can do is that UAPA is instrumental, please understand the wording, UAPA is instrumental for ensuring national security. Yet, it has the possibility of curbing liberty. Both sides of the arguments are required. Discuss. This is a question that you can attempt. Let's go to the next question. The next topic is how will US exit affect climate action? Now please understand, this is important for GS paper 3 environment. This is also important for multiple aspects in IR, where you are writing about the exit of US from the global order. or acting as a bully, in fact, violating various international treaties, exiting from various international organizations and treaties where shared responsibility was the norm till today, can also be discussed in IRGS paper 2. Let's discuss what the basic premise of this article is. The first thing that is mentioned in this article is that US had notified that it is exiting the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was very instrumental in ensuring global warming and climate change can be addressed holistically together by various countries. The parent treaty under which the Paris Agreement was signed is UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The US exited and notified to exit the Paris Agreement, which basically put some amount of obligations to ensure that we do not breach the timeline associated with halting global warming and climate change. The US has also recently notified that it will be exiting even the parent treaty, UNFCCC, as well as the organization known for scientific reports on climate change and the progress done by nations, that is called IPCC. The question is, what the editorial is discussing is, what will be the impact of this, of US leaving on climate change? Let's understand the impact. The impact will be, first and foremost, scarcity in climate funding. As you would know, one of the most important aspects for developing countries to be incentivized to invest in renewable energy technologies or cleaner energy technologies is the fact that they will be given some amount of funding for them to not use fossil fuels in their growth trajectory and path. This was on the idea of common but differentiated responsibility. Why? Because the developed countries had automatically used huge amount of their fossil fuels in the preceding years, in the previous years. And they had automatically achieved till today a status that is of a developed country. Their economy is flourishing. They have used their carbon window, fossil fuels, etc. And now when developing countries are advancing, they are increasing their economic activities, you are asking them to take a more tougher route. Not use fossil fuels, but take a tougher route, invest in renewable energy, invest in other options, etc. This could be unfair. Developing countries could say, when you have done it, why aren't we allowed to use fossil fuels absolutely freely? West, we understand that we have a responsibility together in order to halt climate change. But we have a different responsibility. We have a common responsibility, but we have a responsibility that is lesser, that is not immediate, that is not pressing. And in case you need us to fulfill this responsibility, you compensate us for the hit that we will take. For the hit that we will take. For the lag that we will face in our economic growth. For the costs that will escalate for us in investing in greener in technologies. You compensate us with what is called as climate finance, from the developed countries to the developing countries. And this is rested on a principle called common. Yes, we all have a responsibility, but we have a differentiated responsibility, CBDR. The first and foremost problem with the US exit is going to be a hit at this promise of climate finance that was made by developed countries to the developing countries. Why? Because US was a prominent country in order to provide this climate finance. So Green Climate Fund, other funding mechanisms will see a major scarcity. $100 billion were promised and they were mobilized. But recently, in the recent COP that happened, we have also realized that almost $300 billion will be required for developing countries and small island developing nations. This target is likely to not be fulfilled with the exit of USA. That becomes another or one of the most prominent issues with US exiting. Another major issue is going to be associated with US and their industries very easily violating, not working in the ambit of restrictions, not working in the ambit of internally designed targets, but they will be violating certain protocols. A reaction to this can also be, for example, in Europe, in European Union, etc. The products of US and US companies that are violating these environmental norms, they can face an issue in the entry in terms of imports. When US imports will be entering European markets, etc., there can be some kind of penal provisions that can be implemented on it so that the imports are made a little more expensive and the US is penalized for not having eco-friendly practices in production, in manufacturing, etc. Almost like a carbon tax associated with European Union. The US will still be able to participate as an observer in these meetings, but of course will not take a very important role in that context. Another major issue is that in IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's a very important body that conducts various studies, surveys, and suggests in their reports, IPCC reports you would have heard of, where we are in terms of climate action. In these, various US scientists have participated. But countries have to nominate their scientists to IPCC as well. With the US exiting, I think the moral responsibility or the rapport that the US scientists had in IPCC, that is also going to reduce. Very likely, if one of the biggest powers in the world is not participating, then we may also miss various of our climate targets. Why? Because cooperation was the key, and that can be detrimental. That's all that we need to do from that article. Let's go to the next one. Government launches a drive to reduce road accidents. Now please understand, road accidents are a very big reason for deaths in the country. Unsafe roads, lack of civic sense, some areas that are hotspot where the accident risk is a lot more, sometimes foggy conditions, lack of visibility, problems with the structure, blind spots, speeding, violating traffic norms, they all can be reasons for road accident deaths in India. In fact, data in around 100 districts that was recorded around 89,000 road deaths in 2023 and 2024. That is huge. This is a loss of life that can be prevented. And therefore, the government of India has done a collaboration with civil society organizations. Please note, you can use this as value addition in GS paper 2 when you are writing about government as well as NGO collaboration. Government and civil society organization related collaboration. The Union Ministry of Road, Highway and Transport, the Union Ministry of Road, Transport and Highway has collaborated with an NGO that is called Save Life Foundation. These two have identified 100 districts where the accidents, the incidence of accident is the maximum, and have committed to reduce the road deaths by 50% from what it is now by 2030. A target has been set. The government is working with an NGO for this regard. Please note, more than 60% in the survey that was done, it was mentioned that more than 60% of the accidents did not happen on national highways. They occurred outside national highways, in state highways, major district roads, etc. Why? The build can be a problem. The traffic management can be a problem. The enforcement can be a problem. The nearness of hospital or emergency services, that can be a problem. So this has been identified. Various blind slots have been identified. Certain critical crash locations where the accident possibility is a lot more has been identified. And these collisions will now be monitored. There will be certain programs that will be taken. For example, mirrors where there are blind spots, proper marking on the road in order to see certain turns, etc. Those will also be taken up, but this you can use as value addition. That's all that we need from this article. Next, Aditya L1 decoded how solar storms impact Earth's magnetic field, ISRO. Please understand. Let's first understand what are solar storms and how do they impact space weather. Now, solar storm is any kind of disturbance that happens in the sun's heliosphere, the outer layer, the heated layer of the sun. And because of this, various solar flares or coronal ejections can come out of the sun's surface. These are either large explosions, these are either the explosion of certain plasma, charged particles from the sun. And therefore, with the change in solar activity, these solar flares, coronal mass ejections, are often seen associated with the sun. With these coronal mass ejections, this plasma or these solar flares emanating from the sun, moving towards the solar system, this can impact various things. Since they are charged particles in nature, they can impact various aspects when it comes to the earth. For example, this can have an impact, and this was a UPSC question, please note. This is a pre-question. The solar plasma can impact the satellites and the satellite communication that we are witnessing. That is what we call as space weather events. Satellite communication can be disrupted. The navigation services that are working on GPS, etc., that can be disrupted. The power grid, handling the transmission of energy, power, electricity, those power grid infrastructure on Earth can also be disrupted due to these solar storms or space weather events. The idea is therefore to predict this better, to understand this in order to make any kind of solutions. In order to better understand the solar flares, the plasma ejection, and how it impacts space weather events, ISRO had launched a mission, and that can also be a UPSC pre-question. That mission was called Aditya L1. ISRO had launched a mission called Aditya L1. What were the objectives? The objective was to ensure, to study the corona of the sun, to understand how plasma or coronal mass ejection originate from the sun and are transmitted through various regions in the solar system. The idea is to study how multiple layers below the corona lead to solar eruptions, and how does all of this occurring impact the space weather and dynamics in and around the earth as well. That is Aditya L1 that you need to know about. Let's come to the last one, a very basic understanding in the context of art and culture. In case a question comes and the name comes, please understand, in Rajasthan, a very important and impressive form of puppetry, where puppets are almost decorated in proper Rajasthani attire, for example, ghagra, choli, etc. Right? A sari is added to it. A Rajasthani attire is added to it. That kind of puppetry that originates in Rajasthan is called Kutputtli. The puppets are pulled using a string, and it is performed. It used to be performed in the courts of various kings. The stories were based on a lot of folk heroes, warriors, and moral stories. This is the Kutputtli culture from Rajasthan. India's string puppetry from Rajasthan is called Kutputtli. Please remember the name. Look at these dolls. They are dressed in proper colorful Rajasthani clothes and operated with the change of their heads, their wrists, etc. The name comes from cut, that is wood, and putli, that is doll. It is a significant cultural art form. These puppets are stuffed with their traditional clothing, and the narrators are often using local songs, folklore, some songs, as well as stories of popular heroes, their wins, etc. And these were performed in the royal courts in the medieval times and in history as well. That's all that you need to know from Kutputtli being a puppetry form from the state of Rajasthan. With that, we have come to an end for all the important topics that we had to touch upon today. In case you are taking back something informative, make sure that you like the video. Comment down below if you have liked the initiative. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely Sunday ahead. Take care. Bye bye.